All right, folks, just bear with me just for a few minutes here. We're just gonna get ready to get set up and get into it. Just as soon as we get some things out of the way, which we already have. So let's just go right into it. Oh, okay. Ooh, wow. I have a Whoopi Goldberg thing on my hair, so please bear with me. Aside from that, guys, let's get after it. Today's date, June 29th, 2019, and this is how the frack we got here. I'm your host, the most, Will Buchanan, and yes, my hair is messed up. I apologize. I probably should check if I got on here. But anyway, as we do here on How the Frack We Got Here, we do talk about the week's events and also try to make sense out of it all. Before I do get started, this is an adult podcast, which means that things of adult language, and things of graphic nature may be shown, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. Well, a lot actually happened this week. I mean, we can go from back to forth. So let's just go in. Let's actually go in this with some good news. And what I mean by good news, I mean this: that a judge bars Trump from using $2.5 billion to build the border wall. Now, you're probably wondering, we haven't heard that wall. We haven't heard the word wall used to Trump in a long time. You thought he may have actually given up on it. You may, because, let's be honest, he came up with the campaign of, I'm going to build a beautiful wall and Mexico's going to pay for it. Yay! Mexico's still laughing at us. But anyway, but what actually happened is the judge on Friday did prevent the $2.5 billion that the military funding did put aside to give to President Trump for his wall was actually blocked, seen as constitutional. Mr. Trump called the decision a disgrace. It's a disgrace. With his hands. He always does shit with his hands. Anyway, but I love the fact that, finally some people are coming around to this. That finally some people are starting to understand the wall is irrelevant. It does nothing. I mean, walls haven't been effective since airplanes have been invented. And last time I checked, although we're having massive people come to our borders, a lot of our people are entering the country by airplane. So unless you're going to have a whole bunch of ICE officers at an airport, Trump, give it up. And another thing about this, about immigration, which we are going to go a little bit more into because of the Democratic debates that happened, but eventually America has to come to a reasonable conclusion. You're not going to stop folks from coming into the U.S. You won't. I mean, you could have a very more comprehensive immigration system that actually would help people instead of hinder people. Instead of, you could actually redo the entire program the same way you should do you should be able to do the entire VA program, but you won't. So again, it's like you're mean. It's like, usually in great American fashion, they meet shit with guns instead of meeting shit with lawyers. But again, at least that's some good news to a wall that literally a lot of people voted for that they didn't really understand because, well, a lot of them are racist. But anyway, moving right along is that another one which kind of annoyed me but again, it's Florida. Really shouldn't be surprised. Florida governor signs bill requiring felons to pay for court fees and fines to be eligible to vote. So Florida felons had to pay court-ordered financial obligations in order to vote. Keep in mind, last year, Amendment 4 was passed, which restores voting rights for felons that did not have very serious crimes. So murderers, sex offenders, as long as it was below that, your voting rights are restored. However, Florida decided to take it one step further and say, well, we need you to pay your court-ordered financial obligations before you can vote. In so many ways, that's actually seen as a poll tax, and it really is, because, it was done by Governor Ron DeSantis, Trump's favorite lackey in Florida, because honestly, Andrew Gillum should have won, but that's a whole other story. But again, it's that whole thing of just, you're preventing folks from voting, and like I said, even if you're a felon, and as long as you didn't kill anybody or harm or do any type of loss of life, your voting rights should be restored because you are still your opinion still matters, your opinion still counts. So therefore, it shouldn't be a big issue, except the simple fact of the matter that Florida decides to be Florida and say, well, hey, if you want to do this, this is what's got to happen. And I think that's really messed up because if you're rehabilitating, really try to turn your life around, because anybody who's ever seen prison or the inside of a holding cell, 9 times out of 10, you don't want to be back there. So again, it's like the whole thing of, like I said, coming out and turning your life around. One would think that's like, okay, we'll let you vote, but you have to do this first. And that to me is so asinine because that just denies people the right to vote. And again, It's a Republican-controlled Congress, so really shouldn't be surprised about that. Another story that I have here, Planned Parenthood. Now, the subject of abortion. I will admit that the subject of abortion can be very heated depending on what side you're on. And like I've said before, you're welcome to have your opinion on abortion. I personally push for pro-choice because a woman's body is her own fucking business. But you can have your opinion. It's when you force your opinion on others who think differently than you, and you try to call self-righteous. That's where I have the problem. But the reason why I bring up abortion, basically two stories. The Planned Parenthood in St. Louis has basically been in legal battles for a while, mainly because they're wanting the place to close for said situation. But now there actually is some news about it.
Lewis will be allowed to continue providing abortions despite not having a license. CBSNews.com reporter Kate Smith has been following this story and joins us now to give us a little bit more of insight on what the next steps are. Kate, what's the latest on this?
So just now, the state commissioner filed this brief saying that they will give the clinic a motion to stay. Now, what that means is that they'll effectively be allowed to continue providing abortions despite the fact that the state has not renewed the clinic's license. Now, this is critical because Planned Parenthood has been protected under a preliminary injunction, and that was set to sunset and expire today at 5 p.m. So now with this in place, we know that abortion care will not be interrupted in the state of Missouri because, as we know, this is the state's last abortion clinic.
So what is the next step? What happens from here? What does that mean?
Right. So from here, we're going to go into like an administrative hearing proceeding. And what that means, it's essentially kind of like a court, except it's only on whether or not the license was fairly not renewed. And so all of what we're reading in here is really just about, was it fair of the state to not renew the license? What's critical here to remember is that this will have nothing to do with abortion access. It has nothing to do with Roe v. Wade or Planned Parenthood v. Casey. This is simply whether or not the state was appropriate in its action to not renew the license. Now, in reading this, it seems as if this commissioner believes that Planned Parenthood will ultimately prevail in finding that the state was not fair in not renewing the license. So when you look in here, part of why they issued the motion to stay was because they feel that they may be able to prevail in this case. That is what the commissioner says in this statement. He also disagrees with the state's entire reasoning for why they didn't give the license to begin with. These physician interviews, he doesn't agree with that. He's already nixed that out. But he's also very careful to say in this that this is all administrative. This has nothing to do with abortion access in America. It has nothing to do with any sort of political movement, despite this being such a charged issue. Mm-hmm. And this is going to be ruled completely on an administrative basis.
And when would we expect to see that next step of a ruling?
So we're expecting that on August 1st. So from now what happens is we'll go into a period of discovery where the state and then state lawyers mm-hmm. and then Planned Parenthood attorneys will request documents from each other to figure out a little bit more about the process by which that license was not renewed. Right now,
so it pretty much goes into the fact of legalities that they're having. But the one part I do disagree with about this whole thing, well, they say it's not about abortion, the fact that it's not about the fact that Planned Parenthood still operates and still has abortions there. That's the entire reason why this whole fight is being waged, honestly. We can't sit there and say above all else that it's not about abortion. It is. They may take the legal ramifications and say, well, we're going to remove the license. Like, you're going to remove the license to remove Planned Parenthood. And trust me, after talking with multiple people, it is amazing to me on the other side of abortion, because you have those pro-life, and I say pro-life because I have a wonderful example behind that. But they'll always sit there and say they would rather have Planned Parenthood closed down. So it's like, so Planned Parenthood has other services than abortions that a lot of people do take advantage of for financial and location reasons. But you would rather 86 the entire building in order to accomplish your goal. Wow, that's heavy. That's heavy, and that's nuts, actually. But again, for me, it's like I've said it best. A woman should be able to make choices over her body. The choices and consequences are ultimately hers. There's no ifs, ands, or buts around that. You can argue the fact of, well, what about the baby? No, it is not a baby. It is a fetus. Fetus is the scientific term. But you wonder why they say baby and not fetus? Because you can personalize a baby. You can't find personalization with a fetus, and that's why they love using it as a narrative. So let's get that part out the way. But again, if someone decides that they don't want to be a parent, then that's on them. I'm not going to fault them for that. Honestly, them making that decision is probably the most responsible thing they can do in that situation. Only because we shouldn't just be having children just to be having children. Yes, I said it. If, like I said, it depends upon the parent or parents. But again, a woman should be allowed to make those decisions on her own without judgment, and there should be facilities there that she can go to where it should be done safely and operally. And again, your federal tax dollars have never paid for an abortion. They've always been paid out of pocket. Your federal tax dollars went to the other services that are provided. So again, if you don't like paying for other people's services, you might want to check your paycheck and see where it says Social Security and Medicare. You're paying for somebody else. But again, the reason why we're on the subject of abortion for right now, like I said, two other stories that I have here. This one is basically that someone was going to take a step further and basically go up against the heartbeat bill. So let's go ahead and see what's said about that.
Bill today.
The lawsuit calls the bill a, quote, affront to the dignity and health of Georgians.
The state's Living Infants, Fairness and Equality, or LIFE Act, bans all abortions after a fetal heartbeat is detected.
CBSNews.com reporter Kate Smith has been following this story and joins us now. So, explain to our viewers about this sort of heartbeat bill, because I think we covered it for a while, but then there was all this stuff happening in St. Louis, and we sort of shifted focus. So let's talk about this bill.
So this bill is what we call a heartbeat bill, and it's been very popular in a lot of red states in an effort to both restrict abortion in their state and then also present a challenge to the Supreme Court. What it does practically is it bans abortion after a fetal heartbeat is detected in a woman's womb. So that generally happens around 6 weeks. And we've talked about this before. That is generally before women know that they're pregnant. So a lot of, pro-abortion advocates call this style of bill practically a full ban on abortions. And that's what it says in the complaint that was filed today.
So what else do we know about this lawsuit? I mean, it's just interesting to me that this is happening. My mind is blown.
Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting because we just had such a unrelenting wave of these legislations getting passed over the spring, and yet none of them have been able to be implemented because, because they go directly against all of this Supreme Court precedent that we've had for decades, literally decades.
So speaking of that, the ACLU has been sort of at the forefront of sort of targeting these bills. They've got a lawsuit filed against Arkansas for their 18-week abortion ban. What can you tell us about that?
I mean, the ACLU has been at the front of all of these. And, before there were these, heartbeat bills, there were the trap laws. And before that, there was the admitting privileges law. And the ACLU is really ahead of all of these things and really an advocate for abortion rights in states. And one thing to note is that when these states lose these lawsuits, they have to pay the ACLU's legal fees. So I remember I was looking in Alabama, for example, they've spent more than, I think $3 million to the ACLU for fighting various state laws that weren't constitutional.
You mentioned trap laws. I know we've talked about it before, but some people might not know what they are.
Yes.
Explain that.
So trap laws, targeted regulation of abortion providers. These are state regulations that they look as if they are, kind of health department regulations. They'll say that if you provide abortion, for example, you need to have your hallways be a certain width. That's so a gurney can fit through it. Now, why that's so problematic for abortion clinics is because the abortion procedure is generally a very safe one. It doesn't really resemble what is necessary of like an ambulatory care center, for example. And then also, it's not really easy or feasible to make your hallway a little bit wider or to make your operating rooms a little larger. So they're kind of these things that seem very benign on their face, but then when you think about the implementation of them, they become very difficult to actually implement and keep abortion accessible for women in the state, and they've been very successful in shutting down abortion clinics all over the state.
The states argue this is a matter of safety.
And she's right. She's absolutely right. The simple fact of the matter is just that when it comes to the subject of abortion, that most states will use every legal possibility and ramification to basically close down centers, because they can't flat out sit there and say, well, we're against abortion, so therefore we can't just come out and just, close it down. So the simple fact of the matter is, what just makes me so, irritated, the simple fact of the matter is just that you can't, it's almost like the state cannot accept that women are going to have choice over the bodies, and that's really what it comes down to. I mean, they're finding illegal and instances around that, like you said, trap laws, anything of that nature, regulations and things of that nature that your normal Planned Parenthood area would not be able to provide. And so that's why they've been getting them that, and it's really messed up how far they would go just to make sure that it's not possible. That alone should say a lot. I mean, really say a lot. And even so much so, like this final story I have on this, which is really sad because, again, I want someone who's literally pro-life to look at this story and sit there and still say that you're okay with this. And the reason about this story that just, like I said, this is also during the week, and it's horrible, but at the same time, what's more horrible is what happened afterwards.
A pregnant woman who lost her unborn baby after she was shot in the stomach has now been indicted for manslaughter in the death of the fetus. Authorities say 27-year-old Marshall Jones was 5 months pregnant when she attacked another woman in a parking lot in Birmingham. This was back in December. Jones was shot in the stomach during that fight. The other woman was initially charged with murder and attempted murder, but those charges were dropped when investigators determined that she fired in self-defense. Police say Jones is now facing charges because prosecutors claim she initiated the argument and failed to take herself out of harm's way.
Yep, you heard it. Literally a woman that was in a fight, got shot by another person in the stomach, lost the child. The person who shot her was ruled as self-defense. Keep in mind that they didn't say that the pregnant woman was armed. And on top of that, the baby she lost was now counted as a life lost against her. So not only did she lose her child, she's basically being charged for manslaughter. How? That's literally how. How does that make sense? I understand it's Birmingham, and Birmingham is close to Alabama, so but again, how? How does that make sense that a woman who lost her child because of somebody else's trigger-happy finger now has to sit there and now has to face manslaughter charges for losing the child? Because she didn't kill the child, she literally and figuratively was hit. How does that make sense? And honestly, that's just an example of if we allow these this crazy abortion laws to go forward, this is what women have to deal with. And I hope it doesn't happen. I mean, I hope, those charges eventually get dropped for that woman. But again, that's what every woman will consider now. It's like, the thing about it is, they pretty much are saying, and it's amazing they don't say it, that they really don't want you to have a say. It's like, when you get pregnant, you have to carry the term. Regardless of the situation, you don't have a say in it. And that alone is asinine and crazy. And as you can tell by the previous story I just played, it's madness, really what it is. But again, definitely going to follow that story to see what's going on with that. Hopefully the charges are dropped. And like I said, she's already dealing with the loss of a child. Now she's dealing with the criminal charges if she lost a child purposely. And that alone is crazy. But we're shifting gears a little bit. So a lot of states actually offer free colleges. My home state of Tennessee does offer free education to community colleges. I would really wish that gets bumped up. No knock on community colleges whatsoever, because to be kind of honest with you, a lot of people go to community college to get the BS out of the way that you get at public colleges. So by the time you get to public college, you really are shaving your time in half. So therefore, you actually get to really study the classes that you want and not the BS classes they hand you. But then again, welcome to college. But aside from, like I said, Tennessee offers free education as well as other states do. Virginia is starting to do that, but here's the thing about that. That in West Virginia, for free college, especially the community colleges, they're asking students to pass a drug test before each semester. I don't really know how that works. Because here's my thing. For a lot of people who look at that and go, well, what's the big deal? Well, here's the thing. You're basically, I was like, the more I thought about that, they're basically testing for that, which is amazing to me that in West Virginia, which is considered conservative, that again the idea of marijuana on campus, it's like, well, we'll pay for your free we'll pay for your free colleges, but you gotta piss clean on a drug test. This has been done with food stamps, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I mean, no matter how you cut the mustard, drug tests don't work. What are they actually weeding out? Because I remember a long time ago, welfare recipients, they tried to do the whole drug testing thing. Like, if you piss on a drug test and you're clean, you get assistance. If you fail, you don't. That makes no logical sense whatsoever, whether or not, because let's be honest, I've always said it best about marijuana. I don't smoke it myself, but there are multiple upon multiple upon multiple upon multiple applications, not just in the medicinal area, but other areas that the marijuana plant can be used to help out many areas of business. But we are slowly, and I do mean slowly, because recreational marijuana is starting to come across. You don't believe me? Look at Colorado. Colorado is sitting on cash. They're sitting on cash they're loading out to other states. Crime itself has went down, mainly because they're too high to do anything. At the same time, businesses have boomed just because of the fact that recreational marijuana is legalized and taxed just like tobacco and alcohol. Gee, I wonder who knew that was going to happen. But again, this is going back to West Virginia, to where we'll offer you free tuition, but we want you to, piss on a test. This is where I sit there and say that's completely asinine. Because why does it matter if they're high or not? Shouldn't it matter on whether the fact they can make the grade? Shouldn't it be on the fact that maybe they apply themselves? Because there are so many high functioning users of marijuana. I used to call them weed heads, but marijuana users can be high functioning and still can perform just as well as if they're not on it, and you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know. Unless they were smoking just some really, really good loud, and unless it was on them, that's the only way you know 9 times out of 10. And depending on their reactions also give. But again, if they're excelling in college, again, what's the harm? That's my whole thing about it. But I just think West Virginia has a right idea, and then they say, well, let's add drug testing to it. Because you're kind of hitting a certain demographic whenever you say drug testing, and you know what I'm talking about. But moving right along, guys, Apple. I hate Apple. I hate everything about Apple. I would take Android any day. But in this world of business, Apple has decided, hey, we're basically going to get our new Mac Pro, but we're not going to build it here in the U.S. We're going to move our production to China. Now, for a lot of people that are wondering, well, that's usually what Apple does. Keep in mind what a lot of people didn't know. A lot of Apple products were actually made here in the U.S. Now, as far as the iPhone, the MacBook Pro, and maybe some other models, they were actually manufactured in China. But we did have some manufacturing in the U.S. So, with that being said, and this is Apple's reason why, is because they said the tariffs on China would hurt its contribution to the U.S. economy. Escalating trade tensions between the two countries has forced Apple to consider shifting some of its production outside of China, Nikkei, and outside of China, Nikkei. So again, this is where I usually sit there and say, but Trump said that he was bringing back jobs. Nope, that's not the only company that's actually doing that as well. I mean, for the simple fact of the matter, we sat there and saw automakers themselves are moving stuff forward. For example, this right here in Warren, Michigan, the automakers there, General Motors, is actually closing down this plant a third time. So a third time, this plant in Michigan has been closed, but they're keeping the plant in Mexico open instead for transmissions. And it's amazing to me that this place, which has been around since 1958, is about to lose 14,000 jobs. But they're trying to say it's going to save $6 billion, even though they got a $51 billion bailout. So it's amazing to me where I usually sit there and I see things like this, and these are, keep in mind, automakers who have been given buku bucks, and yet they take those buku bucks, pay executives, give their CEOs golden parachutes, but at the same time, they're still closing factories and moving them across the border, especially in Mexico where there are no tariffs. Baby Huey decided to lift the tariffs on Mexico because he says that they promised that they're going to work on immigration, and Mexico is still laughing. But again, it makes no sense. But again, I feel sad for all the auto workers there. They're going to be out of a job, simply put, because of one company's greed. And the simple fact of the matter is, just like General Motors, Ford, and I forgot the third automaker that went up to the bailout when the automakers went to go get bailed out by Congress. Again, it makes no sense that if automakers and bankers can go to Congress and get bailed out, when is the American citizen finally going to get their bailout? That's my question. But again, yeah, I feel terrible for those auto workers because now they're going to be out of a job while the corporations then say, but we're still going strong. Yeah, fuck y'all. But again, like I said, moving right along, like I said, with the biggest stories, we're basically with Democratic debates, 20 candidates, 10 per night. I have to give it to Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Andrew Nguyen, Kamala Harris, because to me, those were the four that stuck out. Everybody else just seemed to be about just noise. Biden, as I'm about to play here, Biden just didn't really look like he had presidential material. I'll show you what I mean.
The economy and immigration and targeting frontrunner Joe Biden. ABC's Mary Bruce has the breakout moments from Miami. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, Amy. Well, there is no question this was a fiery debate as the early frontrunner Joe Biden went into the night with a target on his back, and he was forced to defend his record over and over again. But it was Senator Kamala Harris who dominated the night and has had its most defining moments. In his first words, Joe Biden tried to make it a night about the president.
Donald Trump thinks Wall Street built America. Ordinary middle-class Americans built America.
But for Biden's Democratic rivals, it was a night to take on the early frontrunner.
Time to pass the torch.
The former VP put on the defensive.
I'm still holding on to that torch.
A shouting match erupting on stage.
It's part of Joe's generation.
And then Senator Kamala Harris stepped in.
America does not want to witness a food fight. They want to know how we're going to put food on their table. Yes.
It was clear the former California Attorney General came ready to play. In the most dramatic moment of the night, she called out Biden's record on race, taking him to task for touting his ability to get things done, even with segregationist senators.
I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country.
Mischaracterization of my position across the board. I did not praise racist. That is not true.
Piling on, she took on Biden's opposition in the 70s to federally ordered busing in order to integrate public schools. And she made it personal.
And, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
Moments later, her campaign tweeting out this photo of a young Harris. Biden forced to clarify.
Vice President Biden, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No,
do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed. Your city council made that decision. It was a local decision.
Rattling off his accomplishments advocating for civil rights before stepping back as the clock ran down.
I'm the guy that extended the Voting Rights Act for 25 years. We got to the place where we got 98 out of 98 votes in the United States Senate doing it. I've also argued very strongly that we, in fact, deal with the notion of denying people access to the ballot box. I agree that everybody, once they, in fact, they should. Anyway, my time's up. I'm sorry.
On the topic of race, South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg with a blunt admission when pressed about why his hometown police force isn't more diverse.
Because I couldn't get it done.
The mayor's campaign recently sidelined by a deadly officer shooting that has sparked outrage in his town's black community.
He didn't have his body camera on. It's a mess, and we're hurting.
But it was this moment from the mayor taking on Republicans over the crisis at the border and invoking religion in the process that took off online.
And for a party that associates itself with Christianity, to say that it is okay to suggest that God would smile on the division of families at the hands of federal agents, that God would condone putting children in cages, has lost all claim to ever use religious language again.
On immigration, a united front against the president.
On day one, we take out our executive order pen and we rescind every damn thing on this issue that Trump has done.
Now, Amy, Biden took hits last night from every direction, facing tough questions not only on his record on race, but also on immigration and health care, even on reaching across the aisle. At one point, he was blasted by fellow moderate Senator Michael Bennet for working with Mitch McConnell and Republicans. Amy, Joe Biden has been arguing that his record is an asset, but last night it was also a liability.
Yeah, he certainly had a target on his back. Mary, thanks so much. And the debate trending big online overnight. Let's take a
So pretty much, yeah. The best way I can put that is, well, that's the second night. The first night was more of Elizabeth Warren because, you know, I will say this: this is not a show that we push. This is not a show where we push candidates and whatnot. This is completely always neutral. But I always do give my personal side of it from a debate standpoint. Is that Warren stood out? She did. Warren stood out because she sat there and she had plans. I mean, she's been rolling out her plans the same way Sanders has. And it's just amazing to me, like the two outright runners, along with Andrew Nguyen, because if you don't know who he is, you're free to look him up because he talks about freedom dividends as part of a universal basic income plan. They seem to all be having plans first. Now, Kamala Harris, from a standpoint, it's just like she found her moment now to finally say something and to go after Biden. And honestly, Biden just looks like it looks like old boy needs to call today. I mean, you were vice president, you were a great vice president, but she did call you out, and it just looked like you was on shaky ground. I mean, some shaky ass ground. But again, it's not surprising. It's not surprising about the simple fact of the matter that really it's just. It's interesting where they're going about it, and I say where they're going about it. Very happy you got license. Whoops, sorry about that. Speaker kicked in a little bit too early. But it just amazed me so to where you guys have to understand the policies that they're arguing about. It's just like, yes, and I hate to say it, Trump does have the ground because idiots still vote for him. Yes, I said idiots because nobody in their right freaking mind, compared with the facts and whatnot, the only people that'll still side with Trump are millionaires, billionaires, and folks who are doing well off. Because trust me, there are folks who are doing well off in under the Trump administration. A lot of us are not. And those will be the ones that he will count on to vote him in, simply put, because they love the fantasy. And that's why I call them idiots, because he is their fantasy, doing things without consequence, not apologizing, things of that nature, because he is still yet to apologize for the Central Park Five. The exonerated five is what they should be called, as what we're going to call them, the exonerated five, because of the five teenagers that were accused of raping a woman and literally got coerced into false confessions, in which no one from the NYPD at the time, no one from the state prosecutor, although the head prosecutor now is starting to lose some stuff, but none of them are being brought to justice for the simple fact of the matter is they coerced false confessions from these kids, even though the rapist was eventually caught as DNA mid-match. Trump took out a 5-page article out of the New York Times and said, bring back the death penalty, bring back our police. He has yet, in which I'll show a video of that, and I'll show a video of that argument later, is that he has yet to apologize for even saying that, although they were exonerated multiple times. But again, some other news that is going to be interesting is that the Charlottesville killer, which I should say the guy who, James Oxfield Jr., who basically ran his Dodge Challenger through a group of people in Charlottesville, was sentenced to life in prison. I think the simple fact of the matter is, I think that's probably the best thing you're going to get, because he tried to cite and say that his life should not be ruined because of this, because of his actions. And I'm like, it is an alarming trend that we're seeing with young white males, is that when they do something completely horrendous, they believe that their lives shouldn't be ended because of that decision. And it amazes me so how they can sit there and that actual statement is sometimes considered. Eddie Brock, for example, Eddie Brock raped an unconscious young woman and the judge gave him probation because he did not want to mess up the young man's life. What about the life that he messed up because he forced himself on another woman? That woman is emotionally and damagely scarred, but for the simple fact of the matter that because he has such a bright future in front of him, he just simply cannot bear the consequences of an adult, although he made an adult decision. So in this case with James Ox Phillips Jr., because he ran over a crowd and killed 3 people, he now should not have to face the rest of his life in prison. And honestly, honestly, from my opinion, I'm glad he's in prison for the rest of his life. But I hope, although it may not happen, but I hope he gets put in the right ring with the right side of the wing with the right brothers that'll welcome him properly. And I mean properly. I hope. Anyway, going right into it. So President Trump decides to basically say that he is extremely angry about the Khashoggi murder, but he defends his Saudi family relationship. Keep in mind, Jamal Khashoggi was the journalist that was killed at a Saudi Arabia consulate, basically because he spoke out about the Saudi Arabia family and the prince. Although the CIA and the United Nations have done an investigation, said yes, that the crown prince ordered the hit on Jamal Khashoggi to be killed at a consulate. And again, Trump for the longest time defends and still defends the Saudi family, but now he claims he is angry, but he's also claiming that nobody pointed a finger at the Saudi prince when everybody from the CIA to the FBI to the UN are all going. And it amazes me though, but then again, we shouldn't be surprised. The Saudi family owns 90% of Trump Tower in the US. They own 90% of the Trump Tower in Saudi Arabia. They have purchased Donald Trump. So we really shouldn't be surprised, the simple fact of the matter, that he is a compromised president. But he's not the only one who has actually purchased him. Another thing about this is that here's how I know the presidency itself, as former President Jimmy Carter sat there and said that this is a legitimate presidency, because Trump won the presidency illegally due to Russian interference. But again, this part right here is where he decides to joke, and to me, it's more of a slap in the face of what he did.
Headlines during his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the G20 summit in Japan. The two leaders, joking in their first face-to-face meeting since the Mueller report, blasted Russia for sweeping and systematic interference in the 2016 U.S. election. President Trump playfully telling Putin, don't meddle in the election. ABC's chief White House correspondent Jonathan Karl is there in Japan.
They greeted each other like old friends, President Trump with a pat on the back for Vladimir Putin. Later, as they prepared to face the cameras, the two leaders commiserated about the news media.
Fake news. Great term, isn't it? You don't have a problem with Russia. We have. You don't have. You might have a little bit. You still have.
A shared joke, although Putin has been accused of having journalists murdered. This is the first Trump-Putin meeting since Robert Mueller released his report documenting Russia's, quote, sweeping and systemic interference in the 2016 election. An American reporter asked Trump if he'd warned Putin not to do it again. The president responded with a smile. The two men met behind closed doors for nearly an hour. The White House did not say whether the issue of election meddling came up. What did come up? A possible Moscow visit for President Trump, Putin inviting him to Russia in May, just months before the election. No word yet on whether the invitation will be accepted.
And John Karl joins us now from Osaka. And John, President Trump now preparing for another high-stakes meeting, this one with the leader of China.
Tom, the eyes of the world, especially world markets, will be on this meeting that the president is having with President Xi later today of China. He's trying to work out a trade agreement to avert what looks like a trade war between the United States and China. Meanwhile, the president is also looking for a potential meeting on his next stop. He goes from here to South Korea, and he has just tweeted, quote, "While there, if Chairman Kim of North Korea sees this, I would meet him at the border DMZ just to shake his hand and say hello."
Yep, he would meet him to shake his hand and say hello. But that's after he got through blowing Putin. Because let's be honest, it is amazing to me the amount of mockery he makes of this. Keep in mind that the Mueller investigation, which I call the Barr report because William Barr sat there and redacted it, but even through his redactions, there are 13 possible obstruction of justice cases. Keep in mind, 13 times that at that time, President Baby Huey had literally obstructed justice. And actually one time was prevented because his aide didn't follow through. So again, it's amazing to me that he goes up to Putin. Don't meddle in my election. Don't meddle in the election. Well, that's how you got voted. That's how you won. I mean, you basically won because of Russia's interference. And it's a mockery that he makes of this, where he sat there and says, well, don't interfere in this election. And then he goes back and embraces Putin like the wife he truly is to Putin. You know, you can take your assumptions from there as far as I go with that. But it amazed me so that he is a compromised president. The report has said that, his actions have said that, and the simple fact of the matter is that, you know, him going up to Kim Jong-il after visiting the China president, which he still has tariffs on, it is amazing to me so that he is making a mockery of this. And yet he claims to be such a great businessman. Right. But again, the video I did want to show, though, aside from that, you know, like I said, that sham of a tour that he's doing. But again, they actually had a debate on CNN about Trump as far as him going over the crime bill, which basically at the time of the Central Park 5 case. And this amazed me so. Do you want to know how Trump literally has people backing him up? This, by far, is one of the greatest examples of what happens when Trump has a supporter that literally just will not give up.
Good thing. If that's what it is. I don't know that that's what it is. I mean, I get what the first step is, but I think it's aptly named. It's one step. And again, Steve, let me bounce back to you because you ignored the premise of my initial question, which was, okay, Donald Trump has never apologized. I always call him Mr. President, but I'm talking about him then as a citizen. He wasn't president then, obviously, back in the late 80s. He's never apologized for it. He thinks they still did it. I can't believe that he believes that. But he says it. Okay. And I don't know why he feels that he can have high ground on this with what he did back then.
Chris, I would love to get into all the facts of that night of what happened with the Central Park 5 because they are not nearly as exculpatory.
All they had were their confessions.
As you might want to believe they are. No, they're
with a
not.
bunch of kids where they put them in separate rooms.
And I read the
books on it. I lived it.
I know the facts very well. Now listen, hold on a second. Hold on a second. And at best,
I'm not going to. No.
You can't just say no 1,000 times and not let me talk.
Another guy's DNA was on the victim.
No,
I'm not going to sit here and let you lie.
Correct. And that was never in dispute, Chris. I'm not lying, Chris. That was never in dispute at trial. The prosecutor, in closing arguments, said, yes, the actual rapist, the person who did the physical insertion, is not here on trial. That was established from the very beginning. You could be convicted of rape, even if you are not the one who did the actual raping.
Now, so they get 5 kids,
and none of them was the one who did the raping.
Yourself to be on air in 2019.
Who did the raping? No. None of those 5 guys.
Terrible.
With those 5.
Terrible. And then he says, the woman is going to have to live with this, and it's terrible.
That night.
Now he's using the victim's tragedy.
Can I talk?
No, go ahead, Steve. But you can't pervert the facts. You can talk, but you can't pervert the facts. Go ahead.
No,
but
I'm going to say
good thing.
That's what Trump supporter does, ladies and gentlemen. They literally, when presented with facts, they walk around, they try to sit there and say, no, that's not it. You know, I used to make fun of Mitt Romney when his entire campaign literally was around the simple fact of the matter where it sat there and said, we're not going to let this campaign be dictated by facts. And at the time when I heard that, I was like, well, that's the end of your political campaign. Thanks for coming. And you know what I've noticed? Someone probably looked at that and said, hold my beer. Because that is Trump. His supporters do the exact same thing. You present facts, they dance around. They keep hammering what they believe because, in the Adolf Hitler book, if you keep on saying it enough times, they eventually accept it as truth. So it's amazing to me that when presented with facts, they act such as this nature. For the simple fact of the matter is, like Kellyanne Conway, who I like to sit there and say, for the simple fact of the matter, needs to go. She violated the Hatch Act. What is basically the Hatch Act, if you're asking? The Hatch Act is basically this. If you're in a political position, you cannot advertise, you cannot speak for, you cannot influence. She did a shitload of that. She violated the Hatch Act on numerous times. But the problem is, the same office that investigates her can't get rid of her. Trump has to. And let's be honest, Trump can't afford to lose any more women after Sarah Sanders decided to finally step down as his White House press secretary, which I think it's funny that she sat there and said, I hope I'm remembered for my integrity and honesty. And we are still laughing at Sarah Sanders. But the scary thing about that is there might be a slight chance she may run for governor of Arkansas. So Arkansas, Kentucky, because you still got Turtle McConnell, do us all a favor. Please vote wisely, because we need Turtle McConnell out. We definitely don't need her in, because if she could lie through her teeth like that and sleep at night, that, in my mind, is a serial killer. But before our last getting into our last one before we get to our good news segment, I found this story interesting just because it deals with the fact of the Mueller investigation that Robert Mueller is set to testify on July 17th.
Limit Mueller's testimony in any form or tell the Attorney General Bob Barr to do so.
No, the president turned this issue over to the Attorney General. The Attorney General said, Attorney General Barr said it was fine for Bob Mueller to testify, and now he's going to testify. So I think, look, what he said, what Bob Mueller said was that his report was his testimony. Now I expect that his testimony will be his report. So no, there's no legal moves that are being made here. Bob Mueller will testify. I'm sure he's going to stick to what's in his report. I don't expect there's going to be a new revelation here. That certainly would be inappropriate. Mm-hmm. So we'll find out when he testifies what he's going to say, but I expect it to be the report.
I think I messed it up. Bill Barr is who I meant to say. Sorry about that. Are you worried?
That's okay. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. Are you worried at all that Robert Mueller will testify that he did, in fact, intentionally leave it up to Congress to decide whether the president obstructed justice? Is that a concern?
No, I tell you what it is. If you look at the volume 2 of the report, which is the obstruction provision, the whole process is turned upside down. I think the biggest question Bob Mueller is going to have to ask himself is, do you really think it's the job of the special counsel to exonerate someone? Because prosecutors don't exonerate. You're presumed innocent until proven guilty, or at least until a charge would be brought in a court of law. Here, he said that, he specifically said, we're not saying the president committed a crime. We're not exonerating him either. But the job of the special counsel is not to exonerate. I think that where this is conflated, and I think it was conflated in the report, it turned the whole burden of proof and our presumptions of innocence upside down. I think that's going to be a big question he's going to have to answer.
Sorry about that. My computer decided to go with it. So, Trump's attorney, which is doing his job, spinning the story. Robert Mueller is set to testify about his report. Now, keep in mind, only him and the Department of Justice and William Barr have only seen the full unredacted report. Not everybody has actually seen it. So we've only seen the Barr report. I mean, you can call it what it is. William Barr and the Department of Justice redacted multiple signatures and issues out of the report. The problem is that even the report that we received still gives Congress a roadmap for Donald Trump's impeachment. So with that being said, it's amazing to me that the White House is sitting there saying, oh, we have no problem. We have no problem with Robert Mueller testifying. We're not going to stop this. We're not going to do anything. The reason why it sounds familiar is because didn't Baby Huey a long time ago, when they talked about the report being public, he sat there and was like, oh, you know what? Let them. I got nothing to hide. Go for it. And 2 weeks later, wait a minute. We need to check. We need to read the report before it's released to the public. So forgive me for saying this, but I think that although July 17th is still a ways off, I expect something from the White House between now and July 17th to sit there and go, wait a minute, we can't have Mueller testify. Why? Because did to Heather Enns, which was also a personal aide to the president. You silenced her, and she acted like she didn't want to go. She didn't want to answer any questions, which I thought was asinine. You tried to go for. You also tried to go for a lot of his aides, which some of them did talk and some of them didn't. Some of them had executive privilege, which again, executive privilege got thrown around a lot when it came to this. When it came to basically. Really having a hearing with these people, because quite frankly, Mueller said it best, that I cannot say if Donald Trump, I cannot say without beyond a shadow of a doubt that he's exonerated. I also can't say that he's not implicated either. So again, it wasn't the Office of the Special Investigations was to either exonerate or implicate Donald Trump, but to present the evidence that he found about the Russian interference in the United States election and anything else attached to it. And what he has found was numerous people with ties to Russian individuals, bankers, and whatnot. He got 10 to 15 people arrested. 19 of them are still under indictment, and there's still about a good 25 under sealed indictments that are across the U.S. So, call it a witch hunt if you want to, but apparently if you put enough smoke somewhere, there's bound to be a fire. And again, I expect Donald Trump to panic before the 17th, before Mueller takes the stand. Aside from that, guys, that's really going to be it for our stories, and we're going to go get into our good news segments. The reason why I say good news, because usually on How the Frack We Got Here, we usually carry a lot of stuff that just, a lot of depressing, sometimes sad, sometimes angry, and we want to leave out on a good note, because, this being on the weekend, you want to get out, you're trying to avoid the sun, maybe get in the sun, maybe get in the pool, depending on where you are with the weather. That being said, I thought a couple of these stories were cool. One story is still, which I guess I shouldn't be surprised because it's England, but I'm never surprised, that a 93-year-old woman wanted to be arrested by UK police to complete her bucket list. Like, I cannot make this up. She literally wanted to be arrested. Now, not arrested as she committed a crime. I mean, she's a 93-year-old woman, but not arrested as she wanted to be a crime. But she just wanted to. I guess she wanted to be the experience. Now, I've always found it weird about the bucket list, because anybody that has a bucket list, I mean, we all got bucket lists. I'm no different. But on my bucket list, I have never sat there and said, you know what, I want to be arrested. Being a black guy in the South, that's not really hard to do. But again, being a 90-year-old woman in the UK, I want to get arrested to see how it feels. If it makes her happy, I mean, I'm pretty sure there's an officer right there going, this is going to be I'm going to have to explain this to my superiors, and they're probably going to chuckle. But again, if it makes her happy, what do you expect? It's England. But aside from that, the other story I have here is that if you're in Las Vegas and you have parking tickets, you can actually get out of your parking tickets with school supplies, which the Las Vegas City Council approved a month-long plan to allow parking tickets to be paid by donating school supplies. Now, to me, I thought that was really cool because, again, I will always be on the side of educators. I believe the educators had a huge impact in my life. I believe the educators are woefully underpaid, overworked, usually in crowded or overcrowded classrooms in schools, and they're not given the tools, resources, and things they need to basically influence what is considered to be one of the most important jobs in the U.S., educating our youth. So again, I love the fact that this is going toward helping school supplies because state legislatures need to definitely do more in that simple fact, not only with educators, but 911 responders, and just overall as far as increasing the minimum wage. But aside, I do love the fact of the matter is just that, yeah, if you have parking tickets, you don't want to pay it, shit, go to Dollar Tree and load up and bring school supplies. And all it costs you was $20. But aside from that, my last good feel-good story is, and I thought this was pretty cool too, was that this, I'm always amazed at the generosity of younger people. And what I mean by that is, I mean like this kid right here, literally for every cupcake he sells, he gives one to the homeless. And so Michael Platt is the name of the guy, and he literally bakes. Nothing wrong with bacon. I love bacon. I love baking stuff. Actually, I love eating more baked goods than anything else, but that's not the point. But I love the fact of what he wants to do is that he has orders. He makes roughly 75 cupcakes a month, and he actually has a pretty good business going. Now, what he also does is that he turns around and not only bakes, teaches other kids how to bake, and at the same time gives for every cupcake he sells, he gives one to the homeless. If that is not a kid that gets the village mentality, I can't tell you different. I mean, I love that. I love reading stories like that because, like I said, it's a village mentality. It's if you raise a child to honestly care for others, not talking religious, but just caring for others, just being a decent human being, and honestly just being a productive member to society and contributing to it. Man, how that would change everything. And like I said, I give the credit for all the props in the world because he actually did that. But aside from that, guys, that is actually our podcast for today. Thank you guys for watching. I'm not the only guy. Like I said, usually in our Table of Bosses podcast that we have here, there are very others that have this as well. I'll start with Thomas Reed. We call him Mountain Puncher. He will probably have his To Be Determined podcast later. What is To Be Determined? It is a fitness podcast in which Thomas talks about things that, he just stays in the gym like every single day. But he does talk about working out, eating out, what to do, what not to do, and gives his personal testimony to where he can actually hopefully encourage others to do the same and to basically determine their own results. That'll actually be a little bit later today at 3 p.m. Central Time. My other buddies, Vaughn, Big VZA Dot, has several podcasts of his own. He actually has the I Get That Reference VST. The VST is a short podcast just over various music, videos, things of that nature. Highly interactive, just like my show. He actually has Rhythmness, where you can reminisce over the rhythm, where it's a musical podcast where he goes over a 4-tier system. If you want to know what the 4-tier system is, you had to watch Rhythmness to find out. He also has Random as Fuck with Uncle VZ. What is Random as Fuck? Random as Fuck is the pool of ratchetness we sometimes dip our pinky toes into to take a break from life and have a chuckle. Some videos make you laugh, some videos make you question, some videos make you scratch your head. But again, it's all in good fun. All 3 shows are active, and if you go to A71 Spoon on Facebook, you'll be able to go to his calendar and see when his podcasts are going to happen. And finally, my boy Trace, we have 2 podcasts of his own. He actually has the Bump Down. What is the Bump Down? The Bump Down is I like to call it a musical smorgasbord podcast. This man is definitely into music and is in the recording industry and always talks about what's happening on the music charts, knowledge, numbers side of the game. So if you're an upcoming artist and want your music to be played, or if you just want to see behind the scenes what happens in the recording industry, you definitely want to watch the Bump Down to find out. And also, before I go into the second one, both Trace and Vaughn do want you guys to submit music. So if you're an up-and-coming artist, just wants music to be played, you can submit it to Vaughn Step Into the Ring with his Rhythmness. Just look up A71 on Facebook to find him. And also you can look up DJ King Anyway on Facebook, Trace Brown on Facebook to submit to the Bump Down to have your music played there. Trace also has a Smoke of Truth, as I like to call it, the unfiltered, check your ego at the door, blunt, honest podcast to go where few people dare to tread. It is definitely not for the faint of heart. But again, the Smoke of Truth is also a great podcast to where you can have the openness, honest conversations, but you gotta be ready to accept the truth because the truth will set you free, but it'll also piss you off first. But definitely for that there. And also my other show, Offlands Podcast, which will be a little bit later today from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Offlands Podcast is basically us going where other people don't go. We do talk about the uncomfortable subjects because the only way you can be comfortable with a subject is talk about it, and that's what we try to do on Off Limits. But aside from that, guys, all of us do have YouTube pages, so if you look up BigVZA.podcast, if you look up The Bump Down, if you look up How the Frack We Got Here, if you look up Offlands Podcast, all of those are active YouTube pages to where you can like, share, and subscribe, and be able to see all of our podcasts so far. So, with that being said, guys, last thing I'll say about How the Frack We Got Here is all about staying informed. informed. What is staying informed? Staying informed means that you're not accepting things at face value. You are going beyond that. You're actually researching, looking it up, and trying to find the truth for yourself. And once you found it, with the things that people can look into themselves and present it to them, you may encourage them to do the same, because an informed community can make a lot better decisions than an uninformed one, because an uninformed one got us trumped, and that's how the frack we got here. So again, guys, thank you all for watching this happy Saturday. I hope you guys enjoy it. Stay cool wherever you're at, if it's hot or if it's cold. But I'm having a Porky Pig moment. But above all that, have fun, guys. See you later. Peace.